All right, so we are recording. So welcome to Startup Grind. My name is Dan Young. I'm the director of the doctoral program in business at Goldie Beacom College. And today we have Candice Caruso from WSFS Bank. Candice, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Excellent. So Startup Grind basically is an international collection of entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs who are always looking for best practices. And when I found out a little bit about what you do for a living, I wanted to try to share some of those learnings with our audience. So kind of first and foremost, can you just tell us a little bit about your story? What's your background?
Sure. I would say that I probably don't have exactly the typical background of most bankers, but I think it gives me a unique perspective. So my professional career for the last 20 years has been focused in financial service and always has been catering to small business owners. I actually started my career very young, working for a actuarial firm focused on pensions and qualified plans, and then later diversified into serving small businesses in funding solutions. And that included both traditional, businesses in the sense of acquisitions and things like that, retail businesses, but also a specialty in franchising and business startup. With that, SBA financing was a critical tool with many of the types of businesses that I served as I pivoted into the funding space. And that's what really brought me to WSFS Bank. And currently I'm the director of government guaranteed lending here at WSFS Bank. We focus in regular times on 7A lending. And I'm happy to explain what that is relative to SBA if someone had questions. But kind of what gives me a unique perspective is that I grew up in a small business. So I grew up in a family business. And as a young girl, I was working trade shows with my family. I was, in my family's business where they had manufactured hair curlers and things like that. And we also had a salon that also had an upscale dress shop where I would interact with customers. And it really gave me a different point of view as it relates to starting a business, growing a business, really understanding what it takes. So, I had my grandfather as a key mentor. He was an inventor, a creator, probably one of the most hardworking people I've ever met. And he was very resilient and tough, and it allowed him to be successful. But he was also partnered with my grandmother, who was really a financial guru. I learned from my mom how to build relationships with people, as she was a talented stylist. My aunt was a gifted spokeswoman, and my father was really talented and insightful when it came to contract negotiations. So I really leveraged that experience, that personal experience, in my professional career. And it's given me a close connection in working with startups and small businesses and even established businesses, and understanding the roller coaster of business ownership. Roller coaster, not just from an emotional standpoint, but the peaks and valleys that you might experience, not just in COVID times, but in regular times, and particularly with the speed of change today.
That's really interesting, because I didn't know about those different parts of your background. And if you think about hair care and styling, what other profession is customer satisfaction more important than that particular profession? So it's kind of clear where you got a lot of your talents from, and just dealing with people right there.
Yeah, and really just knowing that, everybody has a specialty. So knowing the business owner and what their specialty is, and where they might need support or advisors around them to help them through certain aspects or growth points of their business as well.
That makes sense. And so you parlayed some of those different learnings to, launching a startup. Could you tell us a little bit about your past experience of launching a startup, and how it allowed you to be successful launching PPP and leveraging your background in fintech?
Absolutely. So I had the privilege of launching a fintech startup in 2014 called Pango Financial. It was located in Delaware, and I had some support from some outside investors to begin that business. That business, Pango Financial, was focused on franchise funding nationwide and really leveraged technology. So what that meant was that really it was a tool to matchmake SBA lenders, marketable securities loans, and also a platform to initiate a specialized program called Rollover Business Startups. And essentially, all of those programs are very complicated. and something that may seem a bit overwhelming to a small business owner. So my goal was to focus on a client experience and something that could be accessible with the use of an online platform, as well as from an affordability standpoint, something that was affordable to a small business owner that they could leverage relative to funding their franchise or their small business. And Pango Financial continues to run, but I had a great opportunity right after having my daughter in 2018 to join WSFS Bank. And how I, interacted with WSFS Bank prior had been through engagement within the community throughout the state of Delaware. And really, there were some members within WSFS that got to know me and saw me out at different SBA events and things of that sort. So I really developed that reputation. And what WSFS Bank knew about me is that I was looking wherever I was going to go to bring that entrepreneurial spirit. So they allowed me to really be an entrepreneur. And that's what enticed me to make the transition. I was given the opportunity to run the government guaranteed lending division and have a focus on serving the small business customer that I've always been passionate about working with, but really be solutions focused. And when COVID-19 hit and PPP became a program that we really had to respond to overnight, really all of my entrepreneurial skills and agility that I learned from launching a startup, building a startup around speed to implementation, again, having that agility to address all the required regulation, and even leveraging technology to originate these loans all became essential in order to meet the demands of our local community.
That's great. Now, I want to get into your work in WSFS in a second, but just in the work that you did with Pango Financial, what are some of the experiences that you might be able to share about just, consulting with other startups and venture capital groups? Or is there any kind of experiences that you can share that you think would benefit a population of entrepreneurs?
So one thing I would encourage any entrepreneur is build a brand for your business and build a brand for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I had embedded myself and immersed myself in the local community, in startup hubs, industry organization, and really stayed focused on my customer. So that you really almost have to be obsessed, with your outcomes. So I really became obsessed on finding the most creative solutions to provide the best client experience at the most attractive pricing as it related to those funding options I had mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, individuals looked at me as a trusted advisor, as a trusted resource. They would make recommendations for where I should position myself to get greater visibility, where customer opportunities might be. And what I would also share is know who are going to channel business to you. So one of the things that I had done in working with Pango is developing affiliate relationships. So whether that be referral relationships with banks, franchisors, centers of influence, in my case, SBA district offices, business brokers, franchise brokers, funding partners. So all the things that are out there for my particular industry, but you have to find those relationships for you. And for any startup, developing relationships with venture capital firms and financial institutions are critically important relative to short and long term. But what I would share with you is that banks and venture capitalists have different risk appetites.
Yeah.
So knowing the different risk appetites for your audience and the way that they want to be presented to around the value of your business is critically important in order for you to identify, one, if they're the right funding partner for you at that stage of business, and two, if strategically this is the time for you to take on capital. And some of that are reflection points. It could be reflection points on type of business, maturity of your business, and of course, even your own personal financial status at that time.
That makes sense. And by the way, for the folks who are in the gallery, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. We'll make sure we read those off to Candice before the end of our broadcast. So Candice, as you mentioned, SBA is a unique model, and WSFS allowed you to launch this model within the bank under your expanded footprint and into the national franchise. Can you discuss a little bit more about what's it like to be an entrepreneur at WSFS Bank, and how WSFS has allowed you to be an entrepreneur, in essence, in launching a business within a business? What are some of those experiences that you've had there?
Yeah, I would say that WSFS Bank, as well as other large corporations, are looking for entrepreneurs. They're looking for people that are creative, that are going to be willing to take risks, calculated risks, of course. They also bring expertise that maybe don't come from individuals that take more traditional paths to, getting to division manager level positions, things of that sort. So really to have that diversity within a financial institution to allow for growth and also to support WSFS Bank's goal to not only grow the SBA division, but also their desire to implement better delivery transformation, which ties to technology. So
Mhm.
just in kind of, working through both of those points, when WSFS approached me, I had the transferable experience of working in the franchise space nationwide for many, many years. And so, with that experience, I was able to educate them on the risk appetite, tools that are available to, determine longevity of a franchise brand, things of that sort, which are critically important if you're going to grow, particularly outside your footprint. It also, the SBA gives us greater ability to lend because we can look at younger businesses. We can look at businesses that have less historical cash flow. Of course, as I mentioned, franchise startups. In the sense of startups, we usually look for outside of franchise, about 24 months of positive cash flow before we typically get comfortable, but there, could be some exceptions to that, but that's more commonplace. And we will look at guarantors and their need for enhancement around equity investment, which is more or less your down payment for a business loan, as well as if there's limited collateral to pledge. So for all of you that may not be familiar with SBA lending, it essentially is a guarantee that is a credit enhancement for banks to offer loans to businesses that otherwise do not meet their conventional lending appetite. And I was able to really kind of converge my experience around technology, franchise lending, SBA lending, and impart that on the team here at WSFS Bank, SBA, lending team, as well as grow that team. So with all of those things coming together, it was really an ideal opportunity for me. And also, given that it allowed me to stay closer to home, being focused in Delaware as well as, Pennsylvania, and then, more recently growing into even New Jersey with the beneficial acquisition.
Excellent. Excellent. So, in your role, can you talk about some maybe of the trends in entrepreneurship that you see in the state of Delaware in the local region? Obviously that you have information on who's reaching out to you for assistance. Have you seen things since you took the role in 2018? And obviously, there's a small thing called COVID that happened as well. Have you seen some interesting trends in terms of the entrepreneurs that are approaching you for funding or for help?
Well, I would say that I do see trends in the state of Delaware, not necessarily just associated with businesses that are approaching us for funding.
Okay.
So outside of COVID, I know that Delaware has had some fintech focus. They've had a desire to leverage some of the individuals that came out of DuPont that were scientists. So there's been lots of initiatives within the state of Delaware to really preserve that talent and to allow them to incubate and grow within the state. So I believe that some of those opportunities could become our customers in time. However, my interaction with those centers of influence within the state, I would say, they're more early stage or there are grant programs that have supported them to this point, but I do look at that as a long-term opportunity in the state of Delaware. I would share that within WSFS Bank, we've seen a diversified base of all different kinds of businesses approach us for funding. Some could be in the world of franchise startups, so whether that be, a yoga studio or a restaurant or a daycare facility, things of that sort. We certainly get those. We also get acquisition opportunities. So let's say you have someone that is buying an existing business, but maybe they have great experience, but they're a younger entrepreneur or an entrepreneur that hasn't been able to build up as much financial resources to qualify for a conventional loan. SBA financing can be important. We've also had some innovative businesses. One of our customers, D150, we recently did an article on, that is in the state of Delaware, very young business, organically grown. It's truly a startup that we've supported. and they basically provide gasoline services to truckers and other distribution and logistics firms, and they do it overnight. So a really kind of
Mhm.
innovative business based in Delaware that we've supported just as an example and spotlighted. We always like to celebrate our customers, so we try to share that out there as well. What I would encourage all of you to do is just familiarize yourself with not just the PPP loans if you're eligible, but also the SBA right now is offering some additional programs based out of the recent government stimulus that is allowing for some additional interest around SBA financing. Part of that is due to the fact that the SBA is waiving the guarantee fee. So this is up until September 30th of 2021. So that's a tremendous savings for individuals that need to leverage SBA financing as their tool or mechanism to either grow or start a business. Also, there is a payment subsidy that the SBA is offering for the first 3 months for eligible businesses as long as funds remain available. And for on the banking side, the SBA is providing a 90% guarantee to encourage lenders to lend. So inclusive of WSFS Bank as well as any SBA lender, these programs are out there and are intended to help support the economy in rebounding from COVID-19 so that small business owners know that the government is there to support them as they return to being fully open. What I would share too is from a banking perspective, we still need to do our due diligence. So you may get additional questions if you pursue an SBA loan or frankly, any type of business loan where we're going to need some information around your response to COVID-19, whether that relates to projections, whether that relates to COVID-19 health concerns, just to make sure that we understand the health of the business today, not just how it was historically positioned.
That makes sense. And thank you for that, and thank you for those additional pieces of information. I'm gonna be looking those up myself for some of the things that I'm working on. And I know even with the SBA, as the president of Theater N, where we have a shuttered venues application due, I think, in 2 days. So that's very timely. Oftentimes within Startup Grind, we have our speakers, put up a challenge for the audience to do. So in an audience full of entrepreneurs, are there any directives or some challenges you would say, especially when dealing with a bank like WSFS, go out and do this in the next day or two, the next week or two, or the next month or two? Any challenges you'd like to put forth to the audience?
I think that's a tremendous question. I would probably say that really have a disruption mindset. So what is the risk of the future? What are your short and long term, value offerings to customers? How are you delivering on that? How are you attracting new customers and retaining existing customers? But how can you do that in a different or unique way? And keep in mind that everything is moving so quickly, as well as the globalization piece. So, look in your backyard if it's appropriate for your business. If you're a retail-based business, that may be relevant, but it may also be relevant to look at those competitive disruptors out there that, substitutions or, the large giants like Amazon and such of the world, and how they impact your business.
That's awesome. That's great feedback. For the folks who are also on the line, this will be my last question. So if you have any sort of Q&A, please let us know. Put it in the box there. And because we as entrepreneurs and you as a former entrepreneur, current entrepreneur, we are truly all in this together, especially here in the state of Delaware, as we try to put together a cohesive cohesive entrepreneurial ecosystem. What can the Startup Grind community do for you, and or WSFS Bank? What are some of the ways that we can support your efforts, make your job easier, better, more fun, more profitable? What are things that we can do for you?
Well, this is a great way to share, and I view this as a a fun opportunity. So certainly, anytime there's an opportunity to share and give back to other small businesses or to help present resources to them, I'm always excited and interested to do so. What I would share focused on my business at WSFS Bank, so the SBA, and more so focused on the 7A financing, which is more for working capital or real estate purchases, things of that sort. I would encourage the startup grind community to introduce business owners, to myself or to my team that have 24 months of historical success, have a strategy of execution in supporting a business plan. They also cash flow. So SBA loans are cash flow loans. So we really take a hard look at cash flow. And in these times with the disruption of COVID projections, we are, although looking at national franchise opportunities, we're selective in that space. Our primary footprint, of course, is our home state, the state of Delaware, Pennsylvania. So the SBA team can actually stretch throughout the entire state of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Virginia, and Maryland. And I would also just share that it is important to keep in mind, if you are pursuing SBA financing, the timeliness of the stimulus, and that is only available till September. So after that point, the guarantee fees will come back into play unless there is additional legislation that would extend that time frame, and there are budgetary constraints. Broader outside of my department, WSFS Bank is really a bank that is committed to the business community, small and large business. So if you have any deposit needs, cash management needs, merchant services, or anything else outside of that relative to your banking relationship, we certainly are there to serve. And that is something that WSFS is, present throughout the state of Delaware, very accessible, but also really taking an interest in making sure that our local communities survive through the needs of PPP and COVID-19, but thrive on the other side of things.
And as you know, part of the reason why we're here today is that WSFS is my bank, so I definitely would echo that. And I remember the days where WSFS was one of Delaware's smaller banks, and now lo and behold, obviously making huge inroads. And actually, I'm going to ask you one additional question to something that you mentioned before. Would you say that in terms of your role with PPP and SBA, that WSFS has some level of a sweet spot of business? You mentioned kind of the 24 months of ongoing cash flow. Do you feel as though you're in a position to help maybe businesses that are a little bit bigger than others? Because I'm sure I could have a home-based one-person business that has $3,000 per month of cash flow, and I could say, hey, listen, look, it's going up by 5% per year here. But would you say that there's kind of a sweet spot that you look at and you can say, hey, we can definitely put these people in a good position to grow?
What I would share is when a customer comes to us, we would assess for them the right solution, the right funding solution based on their need and based on the maturity of their business. Okay. Now, for my team on the government guaranteed lending side, we're looking for 24 months. But if you're under that point, we might look at personal lending solutions to help you through. So it could be a home equity line, it could be a line of credit, things of that sort. That may help you kind of get going into business. We also have our small business team, which has a slew of other funding solutions that go up to $1 million that they can offer to you. My department, most of our loans are anywhere from about $150,000 up to $5 million. So just to give you a sense of size of loan, that might be helpful. But I would say it's really just knowing the right tool. So, when you look in that toolbox, identifying the right tool given, the maturity of your business, your personal financial situation, and also taking on whether it makes sense for you and doing this assessment of taking on debt versus taking on a partner, whether that be through a venture capital or another partnership, really looking at the long-term benefits as well as, possible costs to that decision. So, really just kind of weighing all those options and working through that. I think when you're in startup mode, that's a critical piece in identifying strategically what your next move might be.
That's a great answer. So thank you so much. So seeing no questions in Q&A, that'll be all that we do for today. So thank you to Candice Caruso and to WSFS Bank for working with us today and teaching us all a little bit about some of the areas of opportunity there. And this has been Dan Young from Startup Grind Wilmington. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at our next podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
And cut. Great. That was awesome. That's a great job.
Thank you.
No,